Marlena with alwaysexpectmore.com, and today I'm going to do part 2 of the Riley Blake Quilt Kit for Cricut. Last week I showed you the quilt kit that I picked and the pattern that I picked to go with that throw size quilt kit. I went with the Comfort and Joy fabric and the half log cabin pattern. And today I'm going to show you how I'm going to cut that all out, because everything is right there in the pattern, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to rotary cut the inner and outer borders, and how I'm going to cut down any fabrics that need to be cut down to 12 inches, and then how we get the Cricut Maker to just cut everything out for us. Are you ready? Let's get started. So here we have some of the tools that we use when we're using fabric with our Cricut. Cricut has put together this sewing toolkit. It's got these scissors, which are lovely and sharp. We have a measuring tape, a leather thimble, some thread snips, which are great to use at the sewing machine, a seam ripper, which of course we hope to never use, but often tend to, some pins, and a cute little pincushion that is shaped like a Cricut Maker, which is so adorable. We also have this, which is the rotary cutting kit. I have it sideways here so that hopefully you can see most of it on video, which is fantastic. It's a lovely giant mat and one of the largest rulers that I've been able to find, plus a rotary cutter. So it's your cutter, it's your ruler, and your mat all in one. I have a Cricut mat right here already set to go. And here is my nice, big, gorgeous Cricut ruler, and I love it. I love it because they have designed it to be 12 inches, so it's already the exact size that you need it in order to cut fabric down to the mat. There are some projects where you don't need the full 12 inches, you might need 9 inches, and all those numbers are there so you can measure that out. A couple other things. Here is my rotary cutter. The Cricut rotary cutter is super thin and super sharp, and I love that about it. My only one wish is it's just a little wobbly in here. It's not quite as tight as I would like it to be, but I find that it's fine. I have tried to tighten this up and it doesn't really get any tighter, and it still just has a little bit of play in there. But it's a great thin rotary cutter, and I love the safety features: open, closed, from the other side, open, and then it springs closed. I love a rotary cutter with a good safety feature. This is the fabric brayer. This is what you use to push down your fabric onto your fabric mats. And then these are a pair of my favorite tweezers. There are 2 tweezers that I love. This one comes with the fabric kit, and this one is great for pulling your fabric off the mat because you try not to touch those fabric mats whenever possible. So we're going to be cutting our fabric today, and here is the Comfort and Joy quilt kit that I showed you earlier. It has all of the fabric measurements, how much of everything is in here, right on the packaging. And what I did is I actually printed off a screenshot from the file, because while there's a PDF with a step-by-step assembly instructions, there isn't a PDF with the cutting and prep instructions. So I just took a screenshot and printed the screenshot to make it easy for me. I do most of my cutting for my Cricut with my iPad, and if the iPad is cutting, I can't also look at the instructions, so I would need 2 things. Instead, I just grabbed a screenshot. If you're going to follow along on this video, you don't need that screenshot, because that's what I'm here for. So it tells us fabrics 1 and 3 through 10 should already be cut to a 1/3 yard, which is 12 inches wide, and don't cut out fabric 2 or the binding fabric. And I'm just going to follow right along here and make this fabric 2, fabric 3, fabric 4, fabric 5, fabric 6, 7, 8, 9, and so on. So the easiest way to actually do that is just unzip this, pull this out, and write right on here. So this will be fabric 1, 2, 3. Now I'm placing all these fabrics in order with fabric 10 on the bottom going up, and I got to fabric 4. Now fabric 4 is actually the exact same as my binding fabric. So I just need to double check that fabric 4, there's a 2/3 yard cut and there's a 3/4 yard cut. So it's very easy for me just to measure which one is my 2/3 yard and which one is my 3/4 yard. So this I can easily see is 2/3 of a yard. It's gonna have to get trimmed right there. And this one, my larger piece, is my 3/4 yard. So this is my binding, and I'll set that aside and put my 2/3 yard piece right here as fabric 4, fabric 3, 2, and 1. Now I will need to trim down some of these fabrics into the 1/3 yard pieces, and so that's what we're going to go ahead and do next. So I'm going to do this from the side so you can get the whole view here of what's going on. Let's make sure you get, there we go, pretty clear view of what we've got. We've got our giant Cricut ruler, and this is fabric 1, and it looks like we're going to need 2 pieces of this fabric 1. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this out, grab my rotary cutter, and then here's the trick when you're cutting fabric. You need something to line up, and you don't want to line up this bottom edge, the selvage edge. You actually want to line up your fold. So find your line across that top, line up that fold, bring the edge as close as you can over here. There you go. Now let me bring this in so you can see. There we go. So you can see how close to the edge here I am. Now you'll see I've got extra here. That's because the edge on the bottom is right here. So I want to make sure that I have a full 12 inches across on all ends, and I'm lining again up at the top here. I'm going to take my rotary cutter. I'm going to open it up because I always store it closed. Then it should be 1 pass all the way across. Close the rotary cutter, and I'll have my 12-inch piece cut just like that. This one is a little big, so I'm going to flip it around. I'm right-handed, so I'm always going to cut on the right side of my ruler. I'm going to again line up this edge. The cut edge should line up, and this top edge should line up. Again, this is the folded edge. My selvage is down there. Open up my rotary cutter, cut, and close. So there we go. I have the first 12-inch piece cut. The first piece takes 2 passes with the rotary cutter because I need to cut both sides. Now I can do the second. My fold is up at the top. The most important is to line up this fold edge and then make sure that I have fabric showing all the way across. I don't want to have the ruler going over and having no fabric here. If there's more fabric on the edge, that's fine. You just don't want no fabric showing in any spot underneath your ruler. Open, cut, and close. Now notice with my hand when I'm cutting, my hand is in the middle of my ruler. I'm putting pressure down on all 5 fingers, and I'm pressing down. Now I'm not pressing down with like all my weight. I'm just pressing down with my fingers to secure it and keep it from slipping. It's not going anywhere no matter how hard I wiggle because of that pressure. I don't want to use my palm because it's easy for me to slip it with my palm. I'm really putting the pressure at those points with my fingers. Also, my fingers aren't anywhere near this edge. If my fingers are near this edge, I could cut it with a ruler. I really want them in the middle of this ruler. And that's another thing that makes this ruler really great for beginners is it's so big. My hands are inches away from the edge. If I used a traditional ruler, which are usually around 6 inches or so wide, you really don't have as much space, and it's so much easier to get your finger on the edge and cut into it. And I know this because the first time that I ever quilted, I ended up with 2 stitches in this finger. So having this big ruler really helps keep your hands away from the edges, away from things that are sharp. And this rotary cutter is definitely sharp. Okay, so I needed 2 pieces of this white, so that's all done. Fabric 4 is 2/3 of a yard, so that needs to get cut in half. And all the rest of my fabrics are 1/3 of a yard until I get to that binding. So skipping fabrics 2 and 3, we'll do those in a minute. Fabric 4 needs to get cut in this big size, so let's go ahead and grab it and do that. Now you might notice that my fabric is skewy on my mat, and I'm actually not using the numbers on my mat at all. In quilting, we like to use one set of numbers, and the set of numbers on your ruler can actually be just slightly off from the numbers on a mat. It shouldn't be the case because both the ruler and the mat were made by Cricut, but different companies, their inch is sometimes a little bit off. So if you just use one ruler throughout your whole project, this is an inch and this is the perfect inch, then you should be fine. However, if you like, you can absolutely line up your fabric right on and up against the lines on your mat, and then line up your ruler with those lines as well, both the top and the bottom. if you really like to make sure that everything lines up perfect. But honestly, as long as your line across the top matches with the line on your fabric, it doesn't matter what's happening underneath your fabric. Open, cut, close. I'm gonna flip it 180 degrees. Move this one out of the way. Line up the top fold and cut off this extra bit right here. So as I'm cutting this, I'm actually a little bit short on this end, and that is probably pretty close to exactly this extra bit right here. So I could have just cut it in half. I'm not worried about this at all. The Cricut machine cuts at 11.5 inches. I still have 11.5 inches here, so I'm fine. But it just means I should have cut that just a little bit closer, and they're not giving us super roomy cuts. The benefit with having a kit that has roomy cuts is that you've got a little bit of extra fabric to play with. However, the roomier the cuts, the more expensive the kit gets. So it's one of those 6 of one, half dozen of another kind of things. And really, we're gonna be fine on fabric for this project. So now we've cut our fabric 1 and our fabric 4. Everything else is 1/3 yard cuts except for our binding, which we're keeping aside until the very end, and our fabrics 2 and 3. I'm going to start with fabric 3, which, as you can see from my instructions, is this fun red with the snowflakes. And when I went to my general information, my piecing instructions, fabric 3 is this, what shows here as a navy inner border. The inner border is cut 2 inches, and it looks like I'll need 5 of those. I'm going to cut a 1/6 if I can out of this, just to make sure that I have enough. And when we're cutting strips with our fabric, we're going to do it the same way we did with the big pieces, but I'm going to start by lining up that fold with my mark across the top, taking it as close to this edge as possible, making sure that I've got, yep, both the bottom and the top layers. So I've got my selvage here at the bottom. I'm lining up across this top fold. And I'm just going to trim this, and that's called squaring up the fabric. So I've now squared up this end, and I'm going to flip it just over like this. I still got my fold at the top and my selvage at the bottom, and now my squared up end is over on the left. So I need 2-inch pieces of this fabric. Smooth it out. I've got my 2-inch mark. This edge should line up and this fold should line up. What's important is actually both, but you really want to make sure that fold lines up, because otherwise your fabric's going to start getting skewy, and you'll notice that you'll have like V's where your fold is and this strip won't be straight. Just cutting 2-inch piece. And looks like I have plenty of extra fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and cut myself a 1/6 to make sure that I have enough and make sure that I read those instructions right. There we go. So I'm going to lay these all together, folds on the top, selvages on the bottom, and set these aside nicely. I won't need them until after I've pieced my quilt top, so I can set them kind of over by where my binding fabric is, keep everything for this whole quilt together for when I'm ready to sew. But that way all my cutting is already done. So this is my inner border, and I just need to do the same thing with my outer border, but obviously not at 2 inches. From my outer border fabric, I need 5.5-inch strips, and it looks like I'll need 6 of them. So I'm going to do the same thing. I need to square up my end first. And I need 5.5 inches. So there's 5.5. Making sure that 5.5 is all the way down this edge, and making sure the line across the top is there as well. So there may come a point where you notice that you're lining this up here at 5.5, and here across the top, you're not even anymore. And if that happens, it's just fabric being fabric. It has a life of its own and it likes to move. So if it does that, you just need to square up your end again and start with a fresh squared up end. And when you square up, you want to cut as little as fabric off as possible, but you just flip it back over here, square up that end, make it clean, bring it back over here, and then everything should line up again. It was starting to get off a little bit. I'm going to square up this end again. Bring everything up here. Cut it all flush. Flip it back over. And then I can cut my last two 5.5-inch pieces. There we go. This is my leftover fabric. I can just set this aside and use it for a fun, scrappy Christmas project. And then I'm going to take all my 5.5-inch pieces and fold them up and put them aside for when I need them to put the borders on my quilt. I have a lovely fresh pink mat here. The pink mats are the sewing mats. As much as possible, we do not want to put our fingers on the mat. Now all the pieces that we're using are symmetrical, so it's not really going to matter in this case whether our fabric is right side up or right side down. This white fabric is the same on the front and the back, so either way it could be right side up or upside down. To put fabric on these mats, you're just going to float it over. You'll notice it's not sticking right away. It's a little bit sticky, but it's not gripping it super hard, and I have the ability to just kind of float it over the mat. And I want to make sure that this selvage edge is above this top cut line. And then I can gently smooth it in place. I have ironed these pieces. There might be a couple little folds, but I've ironed most of the creases out of it. Then I can use my fabric brayer and really press it down onto the mat. And you'll see how smooth that makes it when you do it. It's a little harder to see on camera, but it just really smooths out that fabric. And there we go. I have my first fabric ready to go ahead and go into the Cricut maker. I'm going to set up my maker. I'm going to start cutting these out, and you can see how those look as they're cutting. So I have my Cricut maker connected to my iPad. I'm going to go under all materials and I'm going to select fabric, because obviously we're cutting fabric and it's going to be cotton. So maybe I should actually select cotton, C-O-T-T, cotton fabric. I have the rotary blade in place, and obviously all these projects can only be done with a Cricut maker because you do need that rotary blade to cut the fabric. It's all set to go, and I have mat 1 of 16 mats ready to go. Now the mat does show green, but obviously we're using our pink fabric mat. The first thing it does is it checks to make sure that everything is lined up, and then also that you have the right blade in, so it's detecting the tool. And now it's going to go ahead and cut those out for us. I'm going to go ahead and prep my next mat. That's mat 1 finished cutting. I have more than one Cricut mat at my house, obviously, and I think it's great to have bonus Cricut mats. So that way I could already have mat 2 prepped and ready to go. This is also another 12 by 24 inch mat, not just a 12 by 12 inch mat. Although mat 2 only needs to be 12 by 12, you can always use a 12 by 24 because it's bigger and it'll be fine. So I like keeping the 12 by 24s on hand. You can also use both sides, the top and bottom, if one end of it starts getting worn out. So I finished doing mats 1 and 2, which were the white fabric, and I'm moving on to mats 3 and 4. Mats 3 and 4 are a 12 by 24 and a 12 by 12 of the same fabric. Now I only have one-third yard cut of the fabric that I need for 3 and 4, which by the way is not fabric 4. According to our screenshot, mats 3 and 4 are the gray fabric, fabric 9. Our fabric 9 is this fabric right here. So mats 3 and 4 are this fabric on a 12 by 24, and you can see it's been cut along the bottom, and then the remainder can go on a 12 by 12 or on the top of a 12 by 24 to make the second mat. So this is mat 3 and the next one's mat 4. We can go ahead and load these and get them cut. So now I've done mats 3 and 4, which is fabric 9. Mats 5 and 6 are going to be fabric 6, which is this fun check. Mats 7 and 8 are going to be fabric 5, which is this green. Mats 9 and 10 are going to be fabric 4, which is this black with the pine boughs on it. Mats 11 and 12 are going to be fabric 8, which is hopping over here. It's the red with the mittens. Mats 13 and 14 are going to be fabric 7, which is the white with the pine boughs. And mats 15 and 16 are going to be fabric 10, which is this green with the mittens. So I'm going to go ahead and get those all cut. I'm sure that you're fascinated watching my machine, but I'm going to go ahead and cut those. And when I come back, I'm going to show you how I'm peeling the fabric off of the mat. So to peel off the fabric, and these are the last couple mats that I have. I think this is mats 14, 15, and 16 of the quilt. The first thing I do is I peel off any of the background fabric. And if you find that this isn't peeling off easily or lots of pieces are coming off with it, the first thing you need to do is change out your rotary blade. The rotary blade will get dull over time. So if it's not peeling off easily, it's usually a rotary blade issue. So now I have my pieces, and I'm just using these tweezers and just grabbing from the corner and pulling right up. Now if your quilt or if your mat is fresh, you might have a little bit of fray, and that's fine. As the mat gets a little more seasoned, you'll find that you have less fray, and then you actually need to use the brayer a little bit more to get the fabric down. And as I peel these off, putting them in order by size. And there are 3 different sizes of the rectangles and 1 size of the square. So I'm just putting them in order by size so that when I go to sew, I'll have everything right where I need it. So it's that simple. I'll show you again with this one. These are the squares, and they just peel right off. Now, if you do have any threads on the mat, and I'm not getting a ton of threads here, but I'll have a couple that I'll show you. If you do have any threads on the mat, you don't want to really scrape those off with the scraper. When we use the Cricut for paper, we just go ahead and use that green scraper on the mat, and it's no big deal. With the fabric mats, the adhesive is a little more sensitive to us using the scraper, so we don't want to do that. Instead, what we're going to do is just use the very edge of this tool and just scrape along just very slightly right where the biggest threads are, and just kind of pick those up as we can and grab them. If you have a couple threads on here, it's not a big deal. It's not going to affect the adhesiveness of the mat in the short term. In the long term, lots of threads will build up and lots of lint will build up, and then you just gently wash it off with some gentle hand soap, something that doesn't have like lotion or oils in it, and you'll get another at least 50% out of the mat, and you can probably rinse it off about 2, maybe even 3 times, depending on how aggressive you are with your mats before you need to reuse the mats. I ended up using 3 mats in rotation for this project, and all of them will still be fine for me to use again for another quilt or other fabric project. So I just have one more mat, and I'll show you again. Just peel off this background, and then you can just pick up all the pieces. We're just trying to use the tweezers rather than use our fingers because we want to touch this mat as little as possible. It's very sensitive to oils in fingers, so we just don't want to use our fingers to avoid any oils getting on there. And then when you're done with your mat, you do want to store it with a plastic bit right back on it. And then it'll be all ready for use next time. Yay! So that's it. I have all of my fabrics cut out. This is my binding fabric set aside, my outer border, my inner border. I have all of my pieces all cut and ready to sew when I'm ready to sit down and sew those. I'll be back in 2 weeks to sew these pieces with y'all, because next week I'm actually going to be at the Cricut Mountain Make-a-thon in Salt Lake teaching how to design quilt blocks like a pro at the Cricut Mountain Make-a-thon. So I hope I see you there. If not, then I'll just be back here in 2 weeks with more of this quilt and showing you how to put it all together. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure that you subscribe to this channel if you haven't already, because I have lots of more crafty goodness coming your way. If you haven't given this video a thumbs up already, make sure you do that. It helps the video be seen by everyone else. And if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave those down below. I do read those comments, and if you have any questions, I do my very best to respond to all of those. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in 2 weeks as we finish putting together this fun Christmas quilt with Cricut and Riley Blake.